This is Lady Boule, and I hope you're having a most marvelous day. Thank you for your support. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Thank you for your thumbs up, for your comments, and thank you for sharing the videos. Thank you for all you do to support the channel. Why do white people claim to be afraid of black people? That is a question that has come across my mind a number of times. Why do white people claim to be afraid of black people? A white policeman can take the life of a 12-year-old black child and claim he was afraid for his life. He can shoot a black man in the back as the man is frantically running away from him, as was the case with Walter Scott in South Carolina, and claim he was afraid for his life. He can do anything under the sun to a black person and claim, oh, I was afraid for my life. And I wonder to myself now, if anybody ought to be afraid of anybody, it should be the other way around. Black people ought to be afraid of them because they have a history with black people, and not just in America, all over the world. Yet, you rarely hear a black person say, I'm afraid of white people, or white people frighten me. You rarely hear black people say that, if ever. I don't think I've ever heard a black person say they were afraid of white people. I've heard black people say they didn't trust white people. But I've never heard a black person say they were afraid of white people. Yet, I have never known a black person to do anything heinous to a white person. I honestly have not. So, it got me thinking, y'all. It got me thinking, why do they say that? Well, first of all, I'm just going to say it's a lie. It's a lie. They're not afraid of black people, because if they were, they would leave black people alone. Look at all these Karens out here doing low-down stuff to people who are not even bothering her, don't even want to be bothered with her, and wouldn't even notice her, paying attention to her if she didn't make herself noticeable and do something offensive to bring attention to herself. They claim to be afraid of black people, but they're always up in black people's faces doing something low down. Yet black people don't claim to be afraid of them, and they have a history of doing stuff to black people that would make you afraid of them if you were the type of person to be afraid all the time. But first of all, it's a coward that's always afraid. That's the first thing. It's a coward that's always afraid. They're not afraid. When you're afraid of something, you stay away from it. It's a flex. And I had to look that up because I said, what is a flex? So I looked up a flex, and this is what I saw. Flex is a slang term meaning to show off, whether it be your physique, your belongings, or some other thing you consider superior to those of others. The act of flexing is often criticized as a power move, considered arrogant and insincere. So it's the last part of this definition that I was looking for. The act of flexing is often criticized as a power move, considered arrogant and insincere. So when white people say that they're afraid of black people, it's really a power move. It's a power move in that they can flex on you. They can do something to you offensive, and then they can call on the long arm of the law to protect them so that it ends up being about you and not about them. And it also is an excuse for them to do anything they want to do to black people and then cry, I was afraid. And grown white people do it, and they teach their children to do it. I'm not saying that all white people do this. I'm saying that enough of them do it for it to be a problem all over the country for black people. I read this article a few minutes ago. And that's how come I decided to do this video, because every time you look around in these schools, these white children are doing low-down things to black children. And when you call them on it, it's always they were afraid. Or in the case of, well, I'm uncomfortable. You can't teach them about racism and the things that they've done in the past because it makes them uncomfortable. But they're not uncomfortable calling black children racial slurs and doing other mean things to intimidate black children. This article says a Kentucky school district will reform its anti-discrimination policies after a years-long investigation uncovered serious and widespread racial harassment targeting black students and multiracial students in the county. Located in central Kentucky, Madison County Schools enrolls about 11,000 students across its 18 schools, according to the district. It became the subject of a federal probe in 2021, which found numerous incidents where black and multiracial kids, multiracial being these biracial children with a black parent and a white parent, most likely a black father and a white mother, were harassed by other students, white students, because of their race. This is what the Justice Department said. And they said students of color in Madison County faced racist taunts and intimidation while at school, which in some instances involved the use of Confederate flags and imagery, citing situations where students contended with racial epithets, including the N-word, oh yes, they can't leave that out, and other derogatory racist comments. The investigation also found a disproportionate amount of disciplinary actions taken against black and multiracial students in some schools, coupled with inadequate systems for record keeping and analysis of disciplinary reports. In other words, they're suspending black students without giving any real reason, something that they made up, intimidating black children because they really don't like integration. They want to keep the schools segregated. The Justice Department noted that the school district failed to consistently or reasonably address these issues, and when it did, often failed to respond in accordance with its own racial harassment policies. So what that means is that they will put these policies in place, but they won't enforce them. And white children know they're not going to enforce any kind of anti-discrimination or anti-harassment rules against them because it's the grown-ups that are indoctrinating these children in that hatred, and they're expecting those children to carry that hatred out whenever they come into contact with black children or biracial children. And it's also going to be the case for these other children of color. They don't feel any better towards them. It's just that black children get the worst of it. So the Justice Department had to be called into this school system because no doubt black parents filed some kind of a class action suit against them because of how their children were being treated. So the United States Justice Department had to come in and tell those grown people, those teachers and principals and counselors and everybody that interacts with students, that no student should be subject to racial harassment, including racist taunts with the Confederate flag, which brings back all of the harshness and the brutality of the slave system in the United States. And they're doing it for that reason, to intimidate black children and make black children feel unwanted in that school system. And the minute a black child stands up for him or herself and defends herself, they're going to write that child up and suspend that child from school. Now that is what they're doing. But yet and still they'll scream that they're afraid of black people. So this whole thing about them being afraid of black people is a flex. It's a lie, and it's the most sophisticated form of gaslighting the world has known. Now let's look at gaslighting. Gaslighting is a form of manipulation that often occurs in abusive relationships, and the relationship between black and white Americans has always been abusive. It is a covert type of emotional abuse in which the bully or abuser misleads the target, creating a false narrative and making them question their judgments and reality. In other words, lying. So here are some gaslighting tactics. See if you recognize any of them. Lying to you, and I would add lying on you. People who engage in gaslighting are often habitual and pathological liars and frequently exhibit narcissistic tendencies. It is typical for them to blatantly lie and never back down or change their stories, even when you call them out or provide proof of their deception. Does that sound familiar? Don't these Karens lie? And do they back down when they lie? And when the police lies and says you did something, even when you bring proof and evidence that an individual didn't do something, won't they sit there in the courtroom and still lie and say you did it, you are the one? And these eyewitnesses who claim they saw something happen and they pinpoint the wrong person, won't they go up into court and lie and say, no, he's the one? I don't care if you got DNA, if you got a videotape of somebody else. He did it. So this is gaslighting. Another tactic of gaslighting is shifting blame. Blame shifting is another common gaslighting tactic. Every discussion you have is somehow twisted to where you are to blame for something that occurred. Even when you try to discuss how the abuser's behavior makes you feel, they're able to twist the conversation so that you end up questioning if you are the cause of their bad behavior. For example, they may claim that if you behave differently, they would not treat you the way they do. So, Kunta Kinte, if you hadn't tried to run away, we wouldn't cut your foot off. If you hadn't run from the police, we wouldn't have beat you half to death or killed you. It's your fault. One of the worst gaslighting tactics is denying wrongdoing. People who engage in bullying and emotional abuse are notorious for denying that they did anything wrong. They do this to avoid taking responsibility for their poor choices. This denial can leave the victim of gaslighting feeling unseen, unheard, and as though the impact of them is of no importance. This tactic also makes it very hard for the victim to move on or to heal from the bullying or abusiveness. So yes, when they do things to black people, they deny that they did anything wrong. Again, it's just lying about it or saying, well, that the law said they could do it. Or go back and employ the 3/5 compromise where you're not even a full person. So anyway, it's not important because you're just a N-word. You're just an N-word. So it doesn't matter what they do to you. But they deny they did anything wrong. Whatever they have to do to deny it, which is lying most of the time, that's what they're going to do. Finally, probably the most notorious and the most dangerous gaslighting tactic of all is rewriting history. A person who gaslights tends to retell stories in ways that are in their favor. Now, this is not just on a personal level, this is on a national and international level. The history of black people is being rewritten. Now you can't teach black history. Now they don't want to talk about slavery. They don't want to talk about Jim Crow. They don't want to talk about anything. They don't want anything taught that tells the truth about what has happened with black people in this country. So that is a serious gaslighting tactic. So we are the victims of the gaslighting of America. There may be those who want the truth out there, but there are many more who don't. The asterisks say when you are dealing with someone who uses gaslighting as a manipulation tool, pay close attention to what they do, not what they say. The conundrum that black Americans are in, from my point of view, is that we are also in denial to a certain extent. Many of us are still trying to find ways to take sides with white people against black people. For instance, the white woman is easier to get along with, or black women you need to divest because the black man is so terrible. So all we're doing is setting ourselves up because white people are not training their children to be fair or to look upon black people fairly. We have these young biracial children coming on these social media platforms telling black people that their mothers are racist and their families are racist, and begging white women and black men in particular to stop having children because those biracial children are suffering. And that is what this report said that I just read. So we are in a conundrum in that we don't want to face facts of our history. We want to say that somebody that was our enemy for 400 years is now our best friend and soulmate. And that to me is a form of denial. So back to the subject at hand as I close this video out. White people are not afraid of black people, but white people are masters at manipulation, flexing, and gaslighting. And black people fall into those traps every time we try to believe that anything has changed. Not to say that all white people are racist or terrible, but enough of them believe what the rest of them believe for it to be a problem for black people. As long as we try to make friends with them instead of seeing them for what they really are, set standards with them, and know where and when to draw the line with them, we're still going to be going around in the same cycle trying to say, oh, it's 2023 and this is what they're doing. Yes, that's what they're doing because we don't set any standards and we don't demand anything of them. And the time has come where black people should demand something of them. If your child is going to go to a school, you need to show up for that school. You need to go to the PTA meetings. You need to go to the conferences. And you need to confront the principal. And you need to ask for the code of conduct for that school. You need to ask for all kinds of material that they have in that school. And if necessary, you need to go over everything with a lawyer. If you're going to put your children in harm's way, you need to have a means of protecting your children, because that's where this gaslighting and this line starts. And these white children are being encouraged to do this stuff by the grown people. Again, I'm not saying all of them are encouraged to do it, but enough of them are encouraged to do these things for it to be a problem. They're not afraid of black people, and I'm not saying that black people should be afraid of them. But I do believe that black people should use the same confrontational energy with white people that they use with other black people. They deserve it as much as black people do. So, anyway, that's what I have to say about this. Thank you for listening. Let me know what you think about the video. Subscribe to the channel. Give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment. Share the video. And as always, have a great day.